Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something pretty significant, a new release that looks set to give us a really different view of Elvis Presley in the studio.
That's right, we're talking about Elvis. Sunset Boulevard Studio Sessions 1970-75. It's well, a brand new 5 CD box set just announced today, actually, June 13th, 2025.
June 13th, wow, hot off the press, and it's coming out August 1st.
August 1st, yeah, so not too long to wait.
Okay. And our mission, our goal for this deep dive is really to explore what this collection tells us. It focuses on his work at RCA's Sunset Sound Studios out in LA between 1970 and 75. What does it reveal about Elvis and, his process during that specific time?
Exactly. It's a really interesting window because, this period sometimes gets a bit overshadowed. But this set, it really brings it into sharp focus.
Okay, let's start with the basics then, the set itself. What is Sunset Boulevard Studio Sessions? What kind of stuff is actually in there?
Well, at its heart, it's a big one, 5 CDs. And altogether, you're looking at 89 tracks from those sessions at Sunset Sound.
89 tracks. Wow. That's a lot of music.
It is. And what makes a big part of it really stand out is that 34 of those songs, they've been remixed without the original overdubs.
Okay, overdubs. Just so everyone's on the same page. What would that typically mean for an Elvis session back then, early 70s?
Sure. So think of overdubs as like extra layers of sound they added after the main recording was done, after the band and Elvis laid down their parts.
Right.
For Elvis in this era, that often meant things like string sections, maybe horn arrangements, or those big backing vocal groups like the Sweet Inspirations or J.D. Sumner and the Stamps Quartet.
Ah, okay. So taking those away gives you a drier sound,
Yeah,
more direct.
precisely. You're hearing the core performance.
Yeah.
Just the band, just Elvis, without all that extra production polish that you'd find on the final albums.
Interesting. So it's a totally different perspective.
Yeah, that's the idea. Really highlighting the fundamentals, what was captured live right there in the studio. And besides those remix tracks, the set also has 3 whole discs just dedicated to rehearsal material.
3 discs of rehearsals. That's amazing. So we're not just getting like take 2 versus take 3, but the actual working it out part?
Exactly that. It captures the whole process, which honestly is often just as fascinating as the final polished take.
Yeah.
Oh, and yeah, for the collectors out there, there's a vinyl version too.
Oh, knew you'd mention that.
And it includes a special colored vinyl pressing, but that one's exclusive to Graceland.
Ah, okay. A nice touch for the dedicated fans. So this combination then, the stripped down mixes, all this rehearsal stuff, what does that tell you about why this collection feels so important, so unique?
I think what's really fascinating is that it gives you this raw, less filtered Elvis working live in the studio, yes, but crucially with his touring band.
Ah, the TCB band.
Yeah, exactly. And that specific dynamic, well, it wasn't always captured quite like this. So getting this viewpoint on these particular sessions, it's incredibly valuable for understanding this whole period.
Okay, that leads us perfectly into why these specific sessions, 1970 to 75 at Sunset, actually matter in the big picture of Elvis's career. Where do they fit?
Well, timeline-wise, they sit kind of squarely between that massive success he had with the Vegas residencies starting in '69, right? And then his later years, which involved much more intense touring in the mid to late '70s.
So a transitional phase almost, but clearly a productive one.
Very productive, yeah. And it's an important bridge.
And Elvis's voice, how was it sounding during this time? We always hear about how it changed over the years.
Yeah, and the sources really emphasize this. By this point, his voice had truly matured. It's often described as richer, definitely more dramatic, just capable of incredible power, but also real subtlety.
And these sessions capture that peak.
They really capture that vocal strength, yeah, but in a studio environment, which is maybe a bit different from the live albums.
And musically, what kind of styles were they exploring in these sessions?
It shows a really great balance, actually. You get those huge emotional ballads he was so good at, but also some solid rock and roll tracks, and definitely songs with, strong gospel undertones. Yeah. It shows the breadth of what he was into.
Right, covering a lot of ground. And you mentioned the studio itself, Sunset. It sounds like the atmosphere there was different compared to, say, his Nashville recordings.
Reportedly, yeah. It felt maybe a bit less formal, perhaps more relaxed than working with the more established Nashville session players, the Nashville Machine, as they sometimes called it.
Okay.
The sources really stressed that these sessions captured more of a live band energy. And a big reason for that is he was recording with the guys he performed with on stage night after night.
Okay, let's dig into that then, the band, because that seems absolutely crucial to the sound we're talking about here. Who were these musicians?
Yeah, these were the core members of his touring band at that time, the TCB band. We're talking absolute legends. James Burton on lead guitar, of course,
Of course.
Ronnie Tutt on drums, Glenn D. Hardin playing piano, and Jerry Scheff on bass.
Wow. That's the powerhouse rhythm section from the live shows. So having them in the studio, instead of, session guys who might just be reading charts,
Yeah.
how did that change things?
Well, that's exactly what's so interesting, right? It wasn't just a group of musicians hired for the day. This was a band. They had established chemistry. They knew Elvis's instincts, his tempos, his little cues,
Yeah.
all from playing live with him constantly.
That familiarity must have been huge.
Absolutely. That energy, that almost telepathic connection they had on stage, it translated right to the studio. It brought a certain tightness, a responsiveness,
Yeah.
something you might not get otherwise.
You can almost imagine hearing that lock-in on the tracks. Speaking of tracks, does the set highlight any particular songs as, essential listens or especially revealing?
Yes, definitely. Several get called out. Burning Love is in there. And it's specifically mentioned for showing just this remarkable raw power in this new mix, probably because of that stripped-back approach we talked about.
Burning Love, but raw. Yeah, I can imagine that's intense.
Definitely. Then there's Always on My Mind. This version is characterized by just a heartbreaking sincerity, really capturing the deep emotion in his delivery.
Oh, wow. That song already carries so much weight. Hearing a version from this period noted for sincerity, that's compelling.
It really is. Separate Ways is also listed as a significant track included. And then for a taste of that later career sort of grit and confidence, Kruble is mentioned.
Kruble.
Demonstrates that unmistakable swagger he still had, even in the mid-70s.
I can absolutely picture that. And it sounds like the real suggestion here is for listeners to actually compare these new mixes to the versions they already know, right?
Exactly. That's where the real discovery happens for you, the listener. How does removing the strings or the backing singers change how you perceive the performance? Does it shift your focus? Maybe you hear details in the band's playing or in Elvis's voice that you missed before.
It becomes a much more active listening experience.
It really invites that. Don't forget, they mentioned standout moments within those rehearsal discs, too. Little hints of songs developing or ideas just being tried out.
Okay, let's talk a bit more about those rehearsals and the behind-the-scenes stuff. What kind of candid moments does this set actually capture?
This is where you get that real, fly-on-the-wall feeling. The set apparently includes studio chatter, little bits of conversation between Elvis and the band, maybe even some jokes. You get the human side.
So it's not just polished take after polished take.
Oh, far from it. These recordings, they reveal an emotional rawness that you just don't get on the finished masters, right? They show the real process, maybe false starts, moments where things aren't quite clicking, but also those flashes of spontaneous brilliance.
Can you actually hear him, guiding the band or working through a song idea?
Yes, the sources indicate you can. You might hear moments where Elvis gives some direction, maybe suggests changing the tempo, or tries singing a line a completely different way. You hear the interplay, the collaboration.
Or maybe even the struggle sometimes.
Sometimes the struggle, yeah. That's all part of creating something.
Right.
It really pulls back the curtain quite a bit.
Okay, so taking all this into account, the era, the band, these candid moments, the stripped-down sound, how are these Sunset Boulevard sessions typically viewed? And what does a release like this do for their legacy?
Well, it's true, these sessions sometimes get a bit overlooked. When people think of Elvis's most iconic studio work, they might jump straight to the Sun Records stuff or the big RCA hits from the 50s.
Or maybe the 69 Memphis sessions?
Or Memphis 69, exactly. Those tend to get a lot of the spotlight.
Which feels like a shame, honestly, given everything that seems to be in this box set.
It really is a miss.
Yeah.
Because their true value, and this collection really underscores this, is that they show the depth, the soul, and just the sheer persistence of Elvis as an artist during this specific 5-year stretch.
They weren't just filler between tours.
Not at all. They're a vital, really important part of his musical story. They definitely contribute a lot to understanding his artistry in the mid-70s,
Yeah.
showing that his creative fire and, crucially, his vocal power were still absolutely immense.
It gives you a deeper appreciation for what he was doing vocally then.
Absolutely. For the strength and the nuance he could deliver during that time.
Now, thinking about the dedicated fans, the collectors, this release sounds like it was almost tailor-made to get them excited.
Oh, absolutely. It has those elements designed specifically to appeal to that audience, that Graceland exclusive colored vinyl we mentioned, Prime example of adding collectability.
Right. And what's the initial reaction been like since the announcement just dropped today?
Well, the sources are already noting significant excitement, a lot of positive buzz from the fans online. This kind of comprehensive, deep dive archival release is often really highly anticipated. It's offering stuff people haven't heard quite like this before.
And why do you think this specific set might become, a real standout favorite among collectors down the line?
I think it's the unique content, really. The sheer amount of rehearsal material is one thing. But combining that with the chance to hear familiar songs essentially deconstructed without those usual production layers, that offers genuinely new insights.
It's not just another compilation.
Exactly. It's not just another best of. It's a deep dive into the creative engine room.
And the timing, August 1st, that feels kind of deliberate too, doesn't it?
It does seem likely, yeah. Connecting it potentially with Elvis Week, which happens in Memphis around that time, or maybe other anniversary events. It adds that extra layer of significance for the whole fan community.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the main takeaway? What's the core message from this Sunset Boulevard Studio Sessions 1970-75 box set?
I think fundamentally this set offers a really rare, unprecedented chance to hear Elvis in a raw, unfiltered studio setting during what was a really crucial, maybe complex period of his career.
Right.
It shows the artist at work, collaborating with his most trusted musicians, the TCB Band. And it reveals both the human side, the process, the chatter, and the enduring, undeniable power of his voice.
It really sounds like if you have any interest in Elvis, or just the history of popular music, or even just how iconic songs get made, this is essential listening. Exploring these sessions lets you really appreciate the dedication, the talent that went into making that music.
Yeah, we definitely encourage you to check it out. Maybe look into pre-ordering the set.
Yeah.
Supporting these kinds of archival releases is so important. It really does change how you hear the final product you thought you knew so well.
Absolutely. And, speaking of how songs evolve and resonate, hearing this specific version of Always on My Mind from these sessions, it kind of makes you think, doesn't it, about that song's incredible life. How did it become such a signature tune for both Elvis and later for Willie Nelson? What is it about that particular song that lets it connect so powerfully across different artists, different generations? Why does it still have such a strong presence in pop culture?
Well, that's a whole other deep dive for another time, perhaps.